My name is Harper Cole, 31 years old, standing alone at my brother Ethan's police funeral. Dad placed me in the back away from the real officers, whispering, "Remember your place, Harper. You're just a dispatcher." He didn't know the FBI badge hidden in my pocket felt heavier with every step. No one in my family knew the truth until three men in dark suits walked into that church and called out, "Agent Cole, we need you now." If you're watching this, let me know where you're from. Hit that like button and subscribe to see how my father's face changed when he found out who I really am. They told me to come home early to help with Ethan's funeral, but the truth was I was coming home to protect my family from a threat they didn't even know existed. I had driven all night, the Pennsylvania highways empty except for the trucks that roared past, headlights splitting the darkness. The dashboard clock glowed 2:47 a.m. as I adjusted my grip on the steering wheel, feeling the tension that had been sitting in my shoulders since the call came in. Dad's voice had been cold, flat, like the sound of gravel under boots. "Ethan's gone. Funeral Saturday. Just be here, Harper. The department will handle the rest." That was it. No pause to see if I was breathing on the other end, no space to let the reality sink in. Just instructions like I was one of his officers, not his daughter. I had pressed the phone to my ear, waiting for something more, but he had already hung up. A part of me had wanted to call back, to scream that I was more than what he saw, that I had been fighting a war he couldn't imagine. But what would be the point? To him, I would always be the one who left Scranton, the one who didn't wear the uniform he respected, the one who answered phones in a federal building, just a dispatcher. They didn't know I had been an FBI special agent for 7 years, working counter-cartel operations along the East Coast. They didn't know I had kicked down doors, that I had put my life on the line, that my reports had led to the arrests of men who moved poison into communities like ours. And they didn't know that the last case Ethan had worked on was connected to mine. The road curved as I passed the "Welcome to Lackawanna County" sign, the reflective letters flashing in my headlights. My chest tightened. Home was a place I had driven away from years ago, chasing a purpose no one in my family had ever understood. Mom had tried. The last time I came home for Thanksgiving, she had pulled me aside while she was rolling out pie dough in the kitchen. "Harper, what do you really do in D.C.?" she had asked, wiping her hands on her apron, looking at me with tired, gentle eyes. "Just dispatch work, Mom," I had lied, forcing a smile. She had sighed, pressing her lips together like she wanted to say more. But she didn't. She just nodded and turned back to her dough, and I had gone back to the living room where Dad and Ethan were talking about patrol routes and department politics, a world I was never truly part of. Now Ethan was gone. Killed in a raid on a drug house that in some twisted way was tied to the network I had been tracking from a federal level. The irony cut deep like a blade pressed against a bruise. I turned onto Maple Street, the tires crunching over the old pavement. The houses all looked the same as they did when I was a teenager, sneaking in past curfew, except now they felt smaller, like a stage I had outgrown. I pulled up in front of the old Cole house, a 2-story red brick with white shutters. The porch light was on, casting a warm glow against the cool dark of the early morning. I sat there for a moment, engine running, gripping the wheel, looking at the window where Ethan and I used to sit with flashlights, pretending we were on stakeouts. I turned off the engine. The world went quiet. I took a breath, closing my eyes. I wasn't just coming home to bury my brother. I was coming home to finish what he started. I stepped out of the car, the cold air biting at my skin as I pulled my jacket tighter. The porch light flickered, buzzing softly, the only sound in the quiet street. The front door opened before I could knock. Mom stood there in her robe, her hair pulled back, her eyes red and puffy. "Harper," she whispered, pulling me into a hug. I held her close, feeling how small she felt in my arms now. Her warmth was comforting, but it couldn't cover the hollow emptiness pressing into my ribs. "I'm so sorry, Mom," I said, my voice breaking. She pulled back, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "I know, baby," she said. "He was so proud of you, you know." I looked at her, startled. Her eyes shifted away, and for a moment I saw something there. Something like a secret she wasn't ready to share. Before I could ask, a voice cut through the moment. "Harper, let her get some rest." Dad stood in the hallway wearing a worn flannel shirt, the same one he wore to the hunting cabin. His eyes were hard-guarded like always. "I'll get my things," I said, stepping past him. "You'll stay in your old room," he replied, turning away before I could respond. I carried my bag upstairs, the wood creaking under my boots, each step echoing with memories I had tried to leave behind. The room hadn't changed much. The same faded posters on the wall, the desk where I used to study for tests, the window that looked out over the street. I dropped my bag on the bed and sat down, resting my head in my hands. The weight of everything settled in the silence. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the last messages Ethan had sent me. "Be careful, kid. This thing is bigger than we thought." That was the last one. 3 days before he was killed. I swallowed, blinking back tears, letting the grief settle for just a moment before I locked it away again. I walked to the window, looking down at the empty street, the quiet too heavy to be comforting. A pair of headlights turned onto the block, slowing in front of the house before moving on. My instincts told me to remember the make and color just in case. I turned back toward the room, pulling my service weapon from my bag and checking it, the weight of it grounding me. I had to be careful here. This wasn't DC. This was Scranton, and here I was, just Harper, just the daughter who left, just the sister who didn't wear the uniform. Dad's voice floated up the stairs. "Funeral's at St. Luke's. We leave at 9 sharp." "Got it," I called back. I closed the door, leaning against it, letting the room press in around me. The smell of old wood and laundry detergent brought me back to nights I spent studying with Ethan, him telling me stories about patrol, about how one day he'd make detective, maybe even chief like Dad, and how I would be there cheering him on from the sidelines. I had believed him, but I wasn't on the sidelines anymore. I glanced at my phone, seeing a message from my supervisor, Owen. "Stay alert, Harper." We picked up chatter. Cartel eyes might be on the funeral. I tightened my grip on the phone, a chill running down my spine. I had come home to bury my brother, but it was clear now I had also come home to protect everyone he left behind. My eyes fell on the photo of Ethan on my old dresser, him in uniform, smiling, alive. "I got this, Ethan," I whispered. I slipped my gun back into the bag, locking it, and crawled into bed, staring at the ceiling in the dark, waiting for the dawn. If you've ever felt underestimated by your family while carrying a weight they couldn't see, you're not alone. What would you have done if you were me? Share in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. The porch light outside flickered once more as I closed my eyes. I didn't know it yet, but the cartel had already marked Ethan's funeral as a meeting point for their next move. "You'll sit in the back with your mother." Dad's eyes slid past me like I wasn't even there. I stood in the hallway, holding Ethan's old coffee mug in my hands, the one with the police badge logo chipped on the side. The house smelled like stale coffee and the lingering scent of Mom's cinnamon candles, the ones she always lit when she was stressed. Dad moved around the living room with military precision, checking the framed photo of Ethan in uniform on the mantel, adjusting the angle until it was perfect. He glanced at the folded American flag in its glass case, the brass corners shining under the lamp. "The honor guard will take the casket in first," he said, more to himself than to me. "Bagpipes, flag folding, then the department tributes." I swallowed, wanting to say something, but the words stuck in my throat. Aunt Ruth stepped in from the kitchen, holding a tray of sandwiches. "Frank Harper can help set up chairs at the service," she offered. Dad didn't even look at me. "She's fine where she is." Then he turned to Uncle Bill, lowering his voice just enough to think I wouldn't hear. "Harper's just working dispatch for the feds, helps with phone calls or something." My jaw tightened, heat rising in my face. "Just dispatch, Dad?" "Just calls." I set the mug down a little too hard on the table, the sound echoing in the room. Dad didn't even flinch, just kept talking about the schedule with Bill, about the honor line, the route to the cemetery, the color guard. I stepped outside, needing air. The cold morning bit at my skin, but it was better than staying in that house where every memory felt like it was pressing against my lungs. I sat down on the steps, pulling my coat tighter, staring at the frost on the grass. I closed my eyes and saw Ethan's face, the way he used to grin when he snuck in late from patrol, boots in hand, whispering, "Don't tell Dad." The last time I saw him alive, he hugged me tighter than usual. "Watch your back out there, Harper," he had said, voice low. I had just smiled, teasing him. "You too, hero." I didn't know it would be the last time. The door creaked behind me. I looked up to see Mom stepping out, a small black USB drive in her hand. "Your brother wanted you to have this," she said softly. What is it? I asked. He didn't say. Just told me, when Harper's ready. She placed it in my palm, closing my fingers around it. Her eyes were tired, but there was something else there. A knowing maybe. A fear she wasn't ready to name. Mom, I started, but she shook her head. Whatever it is, Harper, just be careful, she whispered, her hand resting on my shoulder before she turned back inside. I stared at the USB, turning it over in my hand. I wanted to plug it in right there to see what Ethan thought was so important. But something told me to wait. I slipped it into my pocket, glancing down the street as a black sedan drove by slowly, the driver's window rolling down just enough for someone to look out before speeding up again. I felt a cold prickle at the back of my neck. Inside the house, Dad's voice carried through the screen door, barking orders, talking about the proper way to honor a fallen officer. I stood there clutching the USB, realizing Ethan may have left me more than a goodbye. And I had a sinking feeling it was tied to the cartel that had followed me all the way home. The black sedan disappeared around the corner, but the tightness in my chest didn't fade. I took a slow breath, trying to shake off the cold fear crawling under my skin. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half expecting a message from DC. From the bureau telling me to stand down or get out. Instead, it was a memory flashing in my mind, dragging me back to a Sunday morning in Virginia. I had been grabbing a coffee at a grocery store, a day off, wearing jeans and a hoodie, feeling like a normal person for once. That was when I saw him. Miguel Torres, mid-level runner for a cartel cell we had been tracking for months, standing in the cereal aisle with a box of Frosted Flakes in his hand. Our eyes locked and I saw it. Recognition. His lips curled into a smirk, and he started walking toward me. I had reached for my phone, my mind racing for options, knowing I couldn't draw my weapon there in a store with kids running down the aisles. Harper Cole, he said, his accent thick, his eyes dark and cold. Or should I call you Agent Cole? I had tried to play dumb, but he shook his head, clicking his tongue. Next time you won't see me coming. He walked away, leaving me frozen in place, my coffee going cold in my hand. That night, Ethan called. Everything okay? He asked, his voice calm, but I could hear the edge in it. I had a run-in, I admitted, keeping my voice low. It was nothing. Was it Torres? I didn't answer, but he already knew. Don't worry, kid, he said. I'll handle it. And he did. I don't know what strings he pulled, but Torres disappeared off the streets in our county a week later. I never asked Ethan how. Now, standing on the porch with the USB in my pocket, I realized Ethan had been protecting me long before I was ready to face what I really was. I stepped back inside, the warmth of the house hitting me like a wave. Dad was still pacing, his voice sharp, giving orders about the funeral service, the casket, the procession route. Dad, I started, but he held up a hand. Harper, not now, he snapped. Go help your mother. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I turned toward the kitchen, the familiar bitterness rising in my throat. Mom was at the sink rinsing dishes, her hands trembling just slightly. Mom, you okay? I asked, leaning against the counter. She glanced back at me, her eyes soft but tired. He's just trying to keep busy, she said quietly. It's how he handles things. Yeah, I muttered. Handles everything except me. She reached over, squeezing my hand. He doesn't know how to see you, Harper, she said. But that doesn't mean he doesn't care. I didn't answer, just nodded, blinking away the sting in my eyes. My phone buzzed again. This time it was from Owen. Intel says there's a group of unfamiliar men watching St. Luke's, stay alert. The words hit me like ice water. Watching the church. Watching Ethan's funeral. I slid the phone back into my pocket, forcing my face to stay calm. Mom turned off the water, drying her hands. Harper, whatever that is, she said, glancing at my pocket, please be careful. I nodded, but inside, the tension coiled tighter. I wasn't here to sit in the back with Mom. I wasn't here to stay quiet. And if the cartel was planning to use my brother's funeral for their next move, they were going to find out exactly who they were dealing with. Have you ever been underestimated by your family while you were carrying something heavy they couldn't see? What would you have done if you were me? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. I stepped out of the kitchen, my mind already moving, the weight of the USB in my pocket, a reminder that Ethan had trusted me for a reason. Outside, the same black sedan rolled by again, moving slower this time, the driver's eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. And I knew without a doubt that Ethan's funeral had just become something else entirely. It was Ethan's funeral, but I was scanning over 300 faces for cartel eyes. St. Luke's Church stood tall against the cold Pennsylvania sky, its stone walls and stained glass casting shadows across the packed parking lot. Police cruisers lined the street, their lights off, but the black bands across the badges of officers moving in lines told the story of why they were here. I wore black, my hair pinned up, the heels on my boots clicking against the walkway as I followed Mom into the church. Dad walked ahead, his posture stiff, his dress uniform crisp, medals lined across his chest. Inside, the air was thick with incense and the low murmur of voices. Uniforms filled every pew, hats in hands, heads bowed. The front of the church held Ethan's casket draped in the American flag, the badge he wore pinned to a blue sash. I found a place near the back, slipping to the side, keeping my eyes moving. It was easy to pick out who belonged here. The officers in dress blues, the families in dark suits, the neighbors clutching tissues, faces streaked with tears. But then I saw them. 3 men in dark suits, polished shoes, standing too still, their eyes scanning the room, not in grief but in calculation. Their suits were too sharp for a small-town funeral, their haircuts too clean, their watches too expensive. One of them turned, catching my eye for a split second before looking away, pretending to adjust his tie. My phone buzzed softly in my pocket. I pulled it out, typing quickly under the cover of my purse. I think the cartel is here. 3 males, dark suits, back right side. I hit send to Owen before slipping the phone away, forcing myself to take a breath. The organ started a low, steady sound as the service began. My eyes moved back to the men. They were pretending to watch, but they were cataloging who was here, which officers were in attendance, which departments were represented. I clenched my jaw, my nails digging into the palm of my hand. This was Ethan's funeral, and they were using it as a hunting ground. Father Matthews stepped up to the podium, speaking about Ethan's service, his dedication, his bravery. I barely heard him, my mind ticking through options, plans, exit routes. I felt Dad's stare before I saw it. He was sitting in the front row with Mom, his head turning just enough to look back at me, eyes hard, unreadable. Father Matthews stepped aside and Dad stood, walking to the podium. He cleared his throat, the silence heavy as everyone turned to him. My son Ethan was a man who understood service. Dad began, his voice clear. He knew what it meant to protect this community, to wear the badge with honor, to step into danger so others wouldn't have to. His hand rested on the casket, fingers brushing the flag. He died doing what real men do, what real officers do. He understood sacrifice. Then he looked at me, his eyes cold, his lips tightening. Some people, he said, voice dropping, will never understand what that truly means. I felt the weight of every eye that turned toward me, the sting of his words hitting harder than I expected. My chest burned, but I kept my face calm, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Dad turned back to the congregation. Ethan's legacy will live on in this community, in the brothers and sisters who stand watch over our streets. I forced myself to look back at the 3 men in suits. They were watching too. They didn't care about Dad's words or about Ethan's sacrifice. They were here for their own reasons, and I was here for mine. I kept my eyes on the 3 men as Dad stepped down from the podium. They shifted, whispering to each other, one of them checking his watch, another scanning the officers in the front pews. Their body language screamed, trained, deliberate, the kind of men who didn't care about a small-town funeral unless it served a purpose. The choir started a hymn, voices soft, the sound floating through the heavy air. I felt the phone vibrate again in my pocket. I pulled it out, shielding the screen with my hand. A message from Owen. Harper, we're seeing movement. If they try to leave, we need to grab them now. My stomach tightened, a cold wave rolling down my spine. I looked back at the men. One of them checked his phone, nodding slightly, his eyes flicking toward the exit. My pulse thudded in my ears. This wasn't just surveillance, they were planning something. Father Matthews continued with the service, reading scripture about peace and sacrifice. I could barely hear him, every muscle in my body on edge as I tracked the men shifting closer to the aisle. Mom turned around, her eyes finding mine, her lips pressing into a worried line. She could see it even if she didn't know what it was. She gave a small nod, the kind that meant I trust you. Dad didn't look back. My phone buzzed again. Harper confirmation. Their cartel. Orders are to detain immediately if they leave. I clenched the phone, slipping it back into my purse, my mind racing. I was standing in a church filled with officers, family, civilians. One wrong move, and this place could turn into chaos. But if we let them walk, we might lose them for good. I stepped back toward the exit, positioning myself by the side door, pretending to adjust my jacket. I kept my eyes on the three men, memorizing the details. Black suit, blue tie, black shoes. Gray suit, no tie, silver watch. Black suit, red tie, tattoo on the left hand. I took a slow breath, grounding myself. The service was ending. Father Matthews called for the final blessing, asking everyone to rise. The congregation stood, the shuffle of feet echoing in the space. The men started moving, heading for the exit, cutting through the line of mourners. My phone buzzed one last time. Owen Harper, it's now or never. I swallowed hard, the weight of everything pressing on my shoulders. Ethan's death, Dad's cold eyes. Mom's silent faith. The cartel's smirk at a funeral they had no right to attend. And me standing there knowing exactly who I was, even if no one else did. Have you ever had to choose between protecting your family and revealing who you really are? What would you have done if you were me? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. I stepped toward the doors, my hand brushing the badge hidden in my pocket. Because if the cartel thought they could use Ethan's funeral for their business, they were about to learn who Agent Harper Cole really was. I opened the USB Ethan left for me, and it changed everything. I sat in the front seat of my rental, parked under the old oak tree by the cemetery, the cold air fogging the windows. My hands were shaking as I pulled my laptop from my bag, plugging in the USB, the blue light blinking once before it loaded. I took a breath, pressing play on the only file that appeared. Ethan's face filled the screen, the video a little shaky, his uniform collar visible, his hair a mess, like he had run his hands through it too many times. "Hey Harp," he said, forcing a small smile. "If you're watching this, I didn't make it back." I sucked in a breath, covering my mouth with my hand, trying to hold it together. "I figured you'd be sitting there somewhere trying to figure out what to do next." He continued, his eyes dropping before looking back up, steady and clear. "I want you to know I knew Harper. I've known for a while now." He let out a breath, glancing off to the side before meeting my eyes again through the screen. "I know you're not just a dispatcher. I know who you really are, what you really do. And I'm proud of you." My vision blurred, tears slipping down my cheeks as his words sank in, each one hitting harder than the last. "I kept it quiet because I know you had your reasons. I know Dad wouldn't get it, and I didn't want to take that from you. But you need to know, Harp, you've been doing the real work all along." He lifted a folder, holding it up to the camera. "I've been keeping track, you know," he said with a half laugh. "Your commendations, your graduation photo from Quantico, those news articles where you're just a federal analyst, but I know it's you. You deserve to be seen for who you really are." I reached out, my fingers brushing the screen, wishing I could reach him. "You're braver than you think, Harper," he said softly. "And I'm sorry I didn't say it in person." The video paused for a moment, Ethan looking down, blinking hard. "Watch your back, kid. And don't let Dad's narrow view stop you from being who you are." He looked up, his eyes shining with something I had never seen in him before. "I love you, Harp." The screen went black. I sat there, the laptop resting on my knees, my body shaking as I pressed a hand to my chest, sobs breaking free before I could stop them. All this time I thought I had been hiding who I was from everyone. But Ethan knew. He knew, and he still saw me. And he was proud. Have you ever had someone believe in you when you couldn't say who you really were? What would you have done if you were me? Share in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. I wiped my tears, closing the laptop, feeling the weight of everything Ethan had left for me. My phone buzzed, the vibration sharp in the silence. A message from Owen. "They're preparing to leave. We need your eyes, Harper. Now or never." The message from Owen kept blinking on my screen, demanding a choice I could no longer avoid. I closed the laptop, sliding the USB back into my pocket, letting Ethan's words burn into me like a promise. My hands were steady now, the fear replaced with a cold, clear focus I had learned to trust in the field. I started the engine, the hum vibrating through me, grounding me. I pulled out from under the oak tires, crunching on gravel, turning back towards St. Luke's Dacus. The roads were busy with cars, leaving the funeral officers saluting each other, families hugging in the cold air. My phone rang. I answered on the second ring. "Harper, we're in position," Owen's voice came through, clipped professional. "Visual on the 3 targets. They're heading toward a black Suburban east side of the lot." "I see them," I replied, eyes locking on the dark vehicle across the street. One of the men was on his phone looking around casually, but I saw it. The hand signals, the subtle nods, the way they checked over their shoulders, scanning for law enforcement. "Backup ready?" I asked. "We have 2 units staged. We need your confirmation before we move." I pulled into a spot, cutting the engine. I opened my purse, sliding my badge under the flap of my coat, the metal cold against my chest. I stepped out, adjusting my black jacket, pulling my hair back into a tight ponytail. I walked calmly, crossing the lot, slipping between parked cruisers, keeping the men in my sight. I could hear Ethan's voice in my head. "You're braver than you think, Harper." The man with the red tie looked up, eyes narrowing as he saw me. He said something to the others, and they started moving faster, cutting through a line of parked cars. "Owen, they're moving toward the exit." I spoke quietly, pressing the comms piece deeper into my ear. "Copy. Units moving in." I followed, closing the distance, my boots crunching on the pavement. The air smelled like exhaust and wet leaves, the cold burning in my lungs. They turned the corner, and I saw the Suburban's engine running, the driver tapping the wheel impatiently. I stepped around the last car, raising my badge. "FBI." "Stop right there." The man with the red tie froze for a split second before shoving the man next to him, yelling something in Spanish as they broke into a run. "Go, go," I shouted into the comms. Everything exploded at once. Doors slammed, tires screeched, agents in plain clothes appeared from between cars, weapons drawn, shouting commands. "Hands, show me your hands." One of the men drew a gun, and I dropped behind a car, my heart slamming in my chest. I drew my weapon, peeking over the hood, locking eyes with him. "Drop it," I shouted. He hesitated, rage flashing across his face, before throwing the gun under a car, dropping to his knees. Another agent cuffed him, reading him his rights. The other 2 were pinned against the Suburban, hands behind their backs, cursing in Spanish as they were searched. I stood slowly, breathing hard, lowering my gun, letting the cold air wash over me. "Harper status," Owen's voice came through. "Targets in custody," I replied, my voice steady. He appeared from behind a cruiser, nodding at me, his eyes filled with respect I rarely saw from anyone. I glanced back at the church, seeing officers and mourners watching from a distance, whispers spreading like wildfire. And then I saw him. Dad standing by the church doors, his eyes locked on me, confusion and shock twisting his face. I held his gaze, letting him see me, really see me for the first time. Have you ever had to reveal your true self in the most impossible moment? What would you have done if you were me? Share in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Because that was the moment everything changed, and it was only the beginning. Harper Cole. A man in a dark coat stepped forward, his eyes serious. "No, it's Agent Cole now. We need you." My breath caught the cold air burning in my chest as his words echoed in the silence around us. It felt like the entire parking lot froze, all the eyes from the church turning toward us, whispers already starting. I looked at him, recognizing the face beneath the black ball cap. "Owen," I breathed. He nodded, stepping closer, so only I could hear him. "Cartel's here, Harper. They're tracking the officers who took part in the raid with Ethan," he said, his voice low, sharp. "They're planning retaliation today." My heart slammed against my ribs, the noise of the funeral crowd fading into the background. "You're sure?" I asked, my voice tight. "We intercepted comms this morning." "This is happening now," Owen said. "I know you've kept your cover here, but we need you." I swallowed, glancing back at the church steps. My mother stood there, clutching her purse, confusion in her eyes. Behind her, Dad had frozen, his mouth set in a hardline, suspicion flashing across his face. He started walking toward us, each step deliberate. I looked back at Owen, my mind racing. 7 years. 7 years of hiding who I was, to protect them, to protect the work. 7 years of being just a dispatcher in their eyes while fighting battles they could never imagine. I felt the USB in my pocket, Ethan's words running through my head. You don't have to be afraid. It's time they see you. I closed my eyes for half a second, breathing in the cold, letting it steady me. I opened them, meeting Owen's gaze. I'm in, I said. He nodded, relief flickering across his face. He reached into his coat, pulling out the spare comms piece. You'll coordinate the takedown, he said, pressing it into my hand. I slipped it into my ear, the familiar static humming against my skin grounding me. Behind Owen, Dad stopped, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene, his gaze shifting from Owen to me, his lips parting like he was about to speak. Harper, what is this? He demanded. I turned to him, the weight of every moment, every secret, every sleepless night, pressing into my spine until I stood straighter. My hand moved to the badge clipped under my coat, pulling it free, the metal glinting in the gray light. I'm Special Agent Harper Cole, FBI, I said, my voice clear, strong. Gasps rippled through the small crowd, heads turning, whispers rising. Dad's face paled, his jaw clenching as he stared at the badge, then back at me. Agent Cole, Owen's voice cut through the tension, calm and precise. We need you to take command for the arrest now. Dad's eyes darted between me and Owen, his hands curling into fists at his sides. FBI, he spat, his voice low but sharp. What the hell is this? Harper people were watching now. Officers, neighbors, old friends from church. Their eyes were heavy on me, but I didn't let myself look away from Dad. It's who I've been for the last 7 years, I said, keeping my voice steady. He shook his head, his face reddening. You lied to us. To your mother. To me. All this time, this wasn't about lying. I shot back, the words slipping before I could stop them. It was about keeping you safe. Keeping the work safe. Dad's mouth opened, but nothing came out. His shoulders fell for a split second before he straightened again, slipping back into the old chief posture. What work, Harper? He demanded, his voice quieter but harder. What work would have you hiding behind a desk pretending to? Pretending to what? I interrupted, my breath catching. Pretending to be small so you could feel proud of the son who died doing what I've been doing too. His eyes flinched, and for a moment I hated myself for saying it. But I couldn't take it back now. Owen stepped forward, glancing around as officers in uniform began drifting closer, unsure whether to intervene. Mr. Cole, with respect, we need Agent Cole now, Owen said firmly. Dad looked like he was going to argue, but Mom's voice cut through the cold air. Frank, she said from behind him, her voice shaking. Let her do her job. Dad turned, staring at her. She stood there, her eyes glistening but fierce, her hands clasped tightly around the small black purse she always carried to church. Mom's eyes shifted to me, and she nodded once, the same way she used to when she let me know it was okay to step forward even when I was scared. I took a breath, looking back at Owen. What's the situation? I asked, switching to the voice I only used in the field. Owen's posture eased, but his eyes stayed sharp. We have cartel lookouts positioned on the east and south exits. Their vehicle is moving into position now. If we don't take them here, they're gone. And backup? I asked. We have 2 teams staged, but you know this crowd. We need control fast. I scanned the lot, spotting officers I recognized from Ethan's department standing guard at the periphery, talking quietly, unaware that danger was steps away. Dad's breathing was loud in the small space between us. You're really doing this, he whispered, almost to himself. I turned to him, letting him see me, all of me. I have to, Dad, I said quietly. For Ethan. For all of us. He didn't speak, but something in his eyes cracked, a flash of realization I had never seen there before. Agent Cole, Owen said, his voice urgent, we need you to lead the takedown. Now. I nodded, squaring my shoulders, letting the fear drain out of me, leaving only the cold, steady purpose that always came before the storm. Because for the first time I wasn't hiding, and I was ready. I stepped away from Dad, the badge cold against my palm, the eyes of Scranton on me. Owen moved beside me, pulling a small tablet from his jacket, the screen glowing in the gray light. It showed a live drone feed of the church lot, the Suburban parked near the east exit, 3 figures moving around it. They're waiting for the last of the officers to leave, Owen said quietly. We have probable cause tied to Ethan's case and the federal narcotics warrants. They're not walking away. I nodded, studying the feed, memorizing positions, angles, and shadows. Agent Cole, your call, Owen said, stepping back, letting the moment settle. The phrase felt heavy but right. I pressed the comms piece in my ear. This is Agent Cole. Team Bravo on the east exit. Team Alpha on the south. Confirm positions. Bravo in position. Alpha in position. I looked up, seeing a few officers standing nearby, confused hands on their belts, watching me with wary respect. Among them was Rodriguez, Ethan's partner, holding his hat against his chest, eyes wide. Harper, he said softly. You're FBI. I met his gaze steady. Yes. I need you and the guys to keep the civilians back, clear the area now. He hesitated for half a second, then nodded, turning to the other officers, his voice firm as they started moving people away using soft commands. Children were ushered into cars, elderly neighbors guided toward the church doors, the cold air swirling with the hum of engines. Owen spoke into his mic. On your word, Harper. My eyes locked on the Suburban, one of the cartel watchers, lighting a cigarette, another looking down at his phone, scanning, waiting. This was it. On my mark, I said, taking a breath. The man in the black jacket looked up, eyes sweeping the lot, freezing when he saw me. His lips curled, a flash of recognition in his eyes. 3, 2, 1, now. The teams moved in plainclothes, agents flowing from parked cars, weapons drawn, voices sharp. FBI, hands in the air. Don't move. One of the cartel men reached inside his jacket, and I felt my heart stop, the world narrowing to the moment. Gun, I shouted. A shot cracked, echoing off the church walls. Glass shattered somewhere, screams in the background. I dropped to a knee behind a parked cruiser, weapon raised, my breath cold in the air. Drop it, I shouted again. The man hesitated, his eyes wild, the gun halfway out of his jacket. Rodriguez stepped from the side, his weapon drawn, his stance firm. Don't do it, man, he yelled. The man's hand trembled, then the gun clattered to the pavement, skidding under the Suburban. Agents swarmed, tackling him, the other two slammed against the hood, cuffs locking on wrists. Miranda rights read out loud over the chaos. I stood slowly, lowering my weapon, my body shaking with adrenaline but my mind sharp, clear. Across the lot I saw Dad standing by the church steps, Mom beside him, clutching his arm, tears streaking down her face. Dad's eyes were on me, unblinking, filled with something I had never seen before. Pride, fear, respect. The crowd was silent now, the cartel men pinned, agents calling in the clear. I took a breath, lowering my badge, the weight of the last 7 years settling on my shoulders, but lighter somehow. Because now there was no turning back. Have you ever had to step into the light when it was easier to hide? What would you have done if you were me? Share in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Owen stepped up, nodding, once his eyes steady. Agent Cole, we need you to lead the transfer and interrogations, he said. I holstered my weapon, looking at the cartel members struggling against the cuffs, then back at the people who used to call me just a dispatcher. I lifted my chin, my voice calm. Let's finish this. Sirens wailed somewhere down the road, but here Ethan's funeral had turned into a silent battlefield. I moved between the cruisers and parked cars, my boots crunching on gravel, hand raised as I signaled Rodriguez and the other local officers to hold position. Their eyes were wide, darting from me to the agents moving in, weapons drawn but held low, their movements precise. Owen's voice came through the comms in my ear. Harper, suspects are resisting. One's reaching. Copy, I whispered, shifting my stance, my hand resting on the grip of my weapon. The man in the black jacket shoved an agent away, his hand diving into his waistband. Time slowed, the world narrowing as I shouted. Gun, drop it now. He pulled the weapon free, his eyes wild, sweat beading on his forehead. For a heartbeat, the cold wind cut between us, the world holding its breath. Don't do it, I yelled again. Rodriguez stepped forward, weapon raised, his voice steady. Drop it now. The man's eyes flickered, then he swung the gun up. A single shot cracked through the air, shattering the side mirror of a cruiser, glass spraying onto the pavement. My training took over. I dropped to a knee, sighting him, finger steady on the trigger. Before I could fire, 2 agents tackled him from the side, slamming him to the ground, the gun skittering across the lot. Clear, weapon secure. One of the agents called out. I exhaled, the cold air burning in my lungs, rising to my feet as I scanned the lot. Officers were ushering civilians back inside the church. Parents pulling children closed the silence after the gunshot heavy and sharp. I turned to Rodriguez, who was breathing hard, his hands shaking slightly as he lowered his weapon. "You good?" I asked. He nodded, swallowing hard. Yeah, I'm good." I glanced down at the suspect pinned to the pavement, his face pressed against the cold ground, wrists cuffed tight behind him. "That man," I said, my voice low. "He and the others are connected to the network that killed Ethan." Rodriguez's eyes widened, the weight of the moment sinking in. "You're telling me these bastards are why he's dead?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Yes," I said, steady, letting him see the truth in my eyes. "And we're taking them down today." Officers moved in, securing the other 2 cartel members, pushing them against the side of the Suburban as they read their rights. The men shouted in Spanish, cursing, spitting onto the pavement, but it didn't matter. They were done. I looked up, my eyes scanning the edge of the lot, finding him there. Dad stood by the church doors, Mom beside him, her hand pressed to her mouth, tears on her cheeks. Dad's eyes were locked on me, unblinking, his face pale, jaw working as he tried to find words. I held his gaze, letting him see me, letting him see everything he had refused to see for so long. The daughter he thought was weak. The daughter he thought was hiding. The daughter who had been fighting a war he never saw. His eyes glistened, his lips parting, but the words didn't come. And in that moment, I knew everything was about to change. Dad's mouth moved, but the words caught in his throat. He took a step forward, boots crunching on glass, his eyes never leaving mine. For a moment the lines in his face deepened, and I saw him as I had when I was a kid, tall, unshakable, the world bending around him. But today, the world had shifted. He stopped a few feet from me, looking down at the cartel suspects being led to waiting cars, their curses cutting through the cold air. Owen walked past, nodding at me, agents moving with quiet, controlled precision as they secured evidence, bagging the discarded weapon and phones. The red and blue lights of patrol cars strobed across Dad's face, washing over the confusion and fear in his eyes. His hand lifted, hovering before dropping back to his side. "Harper," he finally managed, his voice low, rough. All this time, I kept my breathing steady, the cold seeping into the cuffs of my jacket. "All this time," I said, letting the weight of it hang between us. His jaw clenched, his eyes flickering as he searched my face for something familiar. "And Ethan?" he asked, his voice catching. My chest tightened, the memory of Ethan's laugh, his steady voice in the dark when fear pressed in. "He knew," I said softly. "He always knew." Dad swallowed, blinking rapidly, his shoulders slumping just slightly. He started, but stopped, shaking his head, trying again. "You could have told me." I looked at him, my eyes burning, but I held his gaze. "Would you have listened?" I asked. His lips parted, but he didn't answer. Instead, he looked down, staring at the cracked pavement where the blood from a cartel member's scraped face had dried. For a long moment we stood there, the cold wind whipping around us, carrying the sounds of radio chatter and the distant echo of sirens. Rodriguez stepped up beside me, his face pale, his eyes wide. "I didn't know," he said almost to himself. "I didn't know you were out there fighting the same fight." I turned to him, giving a small nod. "We're all fighting the same war, Rodriguez," I said, "just on different fronts." He swallowed, glancing at Dad before looking back at me. "Ethan would have been proud," he said. I felt the tears sting, but I blinked them away, lifting my chin as the agents led the suspects to waiting black SUVs, doors slamming shut. Owen approached, holding out a small evidence bag, inside it a cartel phone buzzing with incoming messages we would trace later. "Agent Cole, we'll process them at the field office," he said. "We'll need your statements." "I'll be there," I replied. He hesitated, glancing at Dad, then back at me. "Good work today," he said quietly before walking away. I stood there for a moment, letting the cold seep through, grounding me. Mom stepped forward, her hand slipping into Dad's, squeezing it. "She's always been strong, Frank," she whispered. Dad looked at her, then at me, the fight in his eyes softening, the hardness cracking. His lips moved, but again no words came. Have you ever had to stand in front of your family and show them who you really are? What would you have done if you were me? Share in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Dad's eyes filled, red-rimmed, as he took a shaky breath and stepped closer. But he still couldn't speak. And I knew the hardest conversation was still waiting. You've been an FBI agent for 7 years, and I didn't know Dad's voice cut through the cool evening air, sharp shaking carrying across the porch like a slap. The last of the cars from the funeral had gone. The street empty, the front yard littered with fallen leaves no one had bothered to rake. I stood on the steps, hands in my jacket pockets, the badge still clipped inside, the weight of the day pressing on my shoulders. Dad, it wasn't about you knowing, I said, forcing my voice calm. His face reddened, his fists clenching at his sides. Don't tell me it wasn't about me, he snapped. Your mother, me, we spent years thinking you were working dispatch, thinking you were safe, while your brother. He stopped, his voice catching, his chest heaving as he looked away. I was never safe, I said quietly. And neither was Ethan. He turned back to me, his eyes glistening, jaw tight. You lied to us, he said, his voice dropping raw. You lied to your family. No, I said, taking a step closer. I protected my family. I did the job I was called to do, and I did it the way I was meant to, even if it didn't come with a uniform you could brag about at the VFW. His mouth opened, but he didn't speak. You wanted me to be safe, I continued, my voice steady, but my chest tightening with every word. But you didn't want to see me. You didn't want to see that I could serve without doing it your way. His shoulders sagged, and for a moment he looked smaller, older than I had ever seen him. Ethan was proud of you, he whispered, his voice cracking. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away. I know, I said. I pulled the USB from my pocket, holding it out to him. What's that, he asked. It's from Ethan, I said. He wanted you to see it when the time was right. Dad stared at it, then took it, his hand trembling as he closed his fingers around it. We moved inside, the house too quiet, the air heavy with the smell of coffee long gone cold. He sat down on the couch, plugging the USB into the laptop on the coffee table. The screen glowed, Ethan's face appearing tired but smiling. Hey Dad, Ethan's voice came through the speakers, filling the silence between us. If you're seeing this, I'm sorry, I didn't make it back. Dad's breath hitched, his eyes locked on the screen. I wanted you to know something. Ethan continued, his eyes steady, clear. Harper isn't just a dispatcher. She's the strongest person I know. She's been fighting a war you can't see, keeping people safe, protecting us all. I've known for a while, and I'm proud of her. Ethan paused, looking down, then back up, his smile soft. Dad, you should be proud too. Dad's face crumpled, tears sliding down his cheeks as he reached for the screen, his fingers hovering over Ethan's image. The video ended, the room falling into silence, the only sound the quiet hum of the laptop fan. Dad lowered his head, his shoulders shaking, tears dripping onto his hands as he covered his face. I stood there, my heart breaking, waiting. Then, slowly, he looked up, his eyes red, his face wet. I'm proud of you, he whispered, his voice breaking. I'm so damn proud of you. I let out a breath. I hadn't realized I was holding the weight in my chest, loosening just enough for me to breathe. Dad reached for my hand, gripping it tighter than I expected, like he was afraid to let go. I should have seen you. He whispered, his eyes locked on mine. All these years, I should have seen you. I squeezed his hand back, feeling the roughness of calluses earned over a lifetime of service. His hands had always seemed so steady, so sure. Now they shook as he held onto me. You saw what you needed to see, I said softly. You needed to believe I was safe. His mouth twisted, a sad, broken smile pulling at the corner of his lips. Safe, he echoed. I was so busy trying to keep you safe, I didn't see you were out there doing the job I was too old to keep doing. I sat down next to him, the couch sinking under us, the room smelling like old coffee and wood polish, the clock ticking on the wall. Dad, I didn't want to hurt you, I said, the words catching in my throat. But I had to do it my way. He nodded, blinking back, another wave of tears clearing his throat. Your way was the right way, he said. Ethan saw it. I was too stubborn. The mention of Ethan's name hit us both like a wave, the silence filling with the memories of his laughter, his easy smile, the way he used to pat Dad's back after a long day, telling him it was going to be okay. Dad let go of my hand, rubbing his face before looking back at me, his eyes clear despite the redness. I don't know how to fix what I broke, he said. I shook my head, reaching out to rest my hand on his arm. There's nothing to fix, I said. You're here now. We sat there for a long moment, the house quiet, the weight of everything between us, shifting, settling into something that felt like understanding. Dad took a deep breath, exhaling slowly as he looked down at the floor. "What happens now, Harper?" he asked, his voice tired. I swallowed the answer, sitting heavy on my tongue. "Now I go back," I said. "The case that killed Ethan isn't over, and the people we arrested at the funeral are only the beginning." He looked up, fear flashing in his eyes before he covered it with the steel I had seen so many times before. "You're going back into it," he said. "I have to," I replied. "Ethan fought until the end, and now it's my turn to finish what he started." Dad's jaw tightened, his eyes glistening again. "I don't want to lose you too," he said, his voice cracking. I leaned forward, pressing my forehead against his, closing my eyes as I let the tears slip free. "I know," I whispered. "But this is who I am." He pulled back, studying me, his eyes filled with something I had waited my whole life to see. Pride, respect, and love, clear and real. "Have you ever had to choose between your family's fear and your calling? What would you have done if you were me?" Share in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. I stood, slipping the badge back inside my coat, the weight grounding me as I took a breath. "I'm not done, Dad," I said, meeting his eyes. "I can't be." He nodded, his hand gripping mine once more before letting go, his voice low, steady. "I know, Harper," he said. "Go finish it." And as I turned to leave, the cold air from the hallway meeting me, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. That day wasn't just Ethan's funeral, it was the day his sister stood up to continue the fight he left behind. I stepped into the FBI field office in Philadelphia before dawn, the lobby quiet except for the hum of the security scanners and the soft click of my boots on the tile. The building smelled like coffee, printer ink, and the cold promise of early morning. As I walked to my floor, I could see the sun just beginning to edge over the skyline, its light cutting through the frost on the windows, painting the gray walls gold. I paused at the door to my unit, taking a breath before pushing it open. The space was exactly as I had left it, desks covered in files, the evidence boards filled with maps, photos, and strings connecting names, places, dates. The heart of the fight. My desk sat near the back, tucked beside the window. I dropped my bag onto the chair, pulling off my coat, the weight of the badge at my hip grounding me. From my pocket, I pulled out the small photo I had carried in my jacket since the funeral. Ethan in uniform, grinning, the sun behind him, his eyes bright and alive. I pinned it to the corkboard above my desk, right next to my bureau credential. Side by side. I traced the edge of the photo with my finger, letting the moment settle in my chest. "I've got it from here, Ethan," I whispered. The office started to fill, agents arriving with coffee cups, rolling chairs across the floor, dropping files onto desks. The energy in the room shifted, alive, focused, ready. Owen stepped over, a manila folder in his hand, his face set but warm. "You ready, Agent Cole?" he asked. I nodded, pulling my chair closer, flipping open the folder. Inside were surveillance photos of cartel members, transaction logs, maps of safe houses we hadn't hit yet. "They think they can scatter after what we did at the funeral," he said, his voice low. "They're wrong." My phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced down, seeing Dad's name on the screen. I answered, my heart tightening as I pressed the phone to my ear. "Hi, Dad," I said. There was a pause, then his voice came through, rough but steady. "Keep yourself safe, Agent Cole," he said. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in, feeling the weight of what they meant. "I will," I promised. He cleared his throat on the other end. "Ethan would have been proud," he said. "I know," I whispered. We hung up, and I placed the phone face down on the desk, breathing and letting it all settle. The light from the window warmed my face as I looked out over the waking city. The traffic beginning to crawl, people going to jobs, parents dropping kids at school, the world moving on, while justice moved quietly in the background. Have you ever been underestimated just because of your job? Share in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you believe justice doesn't need to shout to be real, it just needs to be done. I turned back to the board, the photo of Ethan watching over me. This fight wasn't over, not for Ethan, not for me, and not for the ones who thought I would stay silent forever. They say the most dangerous enemy wears the face of a friend. I never believed that until I found out who helped kill my brother. I was in the field office, the hum of printers and the clatter of keyboards in the background when I found it. The surveillance file tied to Ethan's last raid had a timestamp that didn't match the master logs. Someone had altered it, shifting the location of the cartel vehicle just enough to give them a window to escape. I leaned back in my chair, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, my heart thudding in my ears. I checked the system logs, the signature of the last officer to handle the file blinking back at me. Travis Miller. A man who used to eat Sunday dinners at our house. A man who called Ethan brother and handed out candy to neighborhood kids on Halloween, still in uniform. I took a slow breath, pressing the comms piece in my ear. Owen, I said, keeping my voice low. We have a problem. His footsteps approached, and he leaned down, reading the screen. His jaw tightened. You're sure? He asked. I nodded. He altered the file. The cartel knew where Ethan's team would be and when. Owen sighed, his hand rubbing the back of his neck. You ready for this? He asked. I don't have a choice, I said. Later that afternoon, I sat across from Dad at the kitchen table. The same table where Ethan and I had once done homework, where Dad had polished his boots before shifts. Travis, Dad repeated, his eyes narrowing. You're saying Travis Miller is dirty? I met his gaze, steady, calm. I'm saying he leaked information that got Ethan killed, I said. Dad's fist slammed down on the table, the sound echoing in the kitchen. No, he snapped. No, he wouldn't do that. Dad, the evidence. I don't care about evidence, he shouted, his face red, veins standing out on his neck. Travis is family. My hands curled around my coffee mug, my knuckles white. He's not family, I said, my voice cold. Family doesn't sell out their own. Dad's eyes flashed, but I didn't look away. I protected him once, Dad said, his voice softer, now breaking. There were rumors about his gambling, about money missing from evidence. I told Internal Affairs to leave him alone. I swallowed, the anger and grief rising in my chest like fire. Your protection may have killed Ethan, I whispered. Dad looked like I had struck him, his shoulders slumping, his eyes glistening. I didn't know, he said, shaking his head. God, I didn't know. I stood, grabbing my coat. You need to let me handle this, I said. Dad looked up at me, defeated, tears slipping down his weathered face. Bring him in, he said, his voice raw. Do what you have to do. I nodded, once turning toward the door, the cold air meeting me as I stepped outside. Travis Miller had once stood in our kitchen laughing with Ethan, calling him brother. Now he was the reason Ethan was in the ground. And I was going to make him answer for it. I parked outside the diner on Main Street, the neon open sign flickering in the window. Travis was already inside, sitting in a corner booth, his hat pulled low, fingers drumming on the table. I watched him for a moment through the glass, remembering how he used to toss a football with Ethan in the yard, how he used to call me kiddo. I pushed the door open, the bell chiming overhead, the smell of burnt coffee and grease wrapping around me. Travis looked up, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Harper, he said, nodding. Sit down. I slid into the booth across from him, taking off my gloves, meeting his gaze. Coffee, the waitress asked, but I shook my head. Travis cleared his throat, picking at a paper napkin. How's your dad holding up? He asked, trying for casual. I ignored the question, leaning forward. Tell me, Travis. I said, my voice quiet. How much did the cartel pay you to leak Ethan's raid? His face went pale, his mouth opening and closing before any sound came out. Harper, I don't know what you're talking about, he said, forcing a laugh that died in his throat. I pulled out my badge, laying it on the table between us, the gold catching the light. I'm not here as Harper, I said. I'm here as Agent Cole. He swallowed hard, his hands shaking. You got it all wrong, he whispered. No, I said, my eyes locked on his. I got it exactly right. He looked away out the window, watching the cars roll past, headlights streaking through the darkening evening. I didn't mean for him to die, he said, his voice cracking. Then why did you do it? I demanded, the hurt in my voice sharper than I wanted it to be. His eyes snapped back to mine, tears forming. They had my daughter's address, he said, his hands gripping the table. They said if I didn't give them what they needed, they'd kill her. I didn't think it would lead to Ethan. My chest tightened, the anger and grief boiling under my skin. You think that excuses it, I said, my voice low. You think Ethan would have wanted you to trade his life for your secrets? Travis shook his head, tears rolling down his face. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. I leaned back, taking a breath, the weight of everything pressing down on me. You're under arrest, I said, pulling out the cuffs sliding out of the booth. He didn't resist as I turned him around, the cuffs clicking shut around his wrists. People in the diner stared, their forks paused midair, the whispers starting as I read him his rights. You have the right to remain silent. His shoulders shook as he cried, the tears dropping onto the floor as I led him out into the cold night. As I guided him toward the bureau vehicle, he turned, his eyes swollen, voice shaking. There's someone else, he said, choking on the words. Someone bigger than me. Someone in your office. I froze, my hand tightening on his arm. What's their name? I demanded. But Travis just shook his head, tears streaming. They'll kill me, he whispered. I shoved him into the back seat, slamming the door, my breath clouding in the cold air. I looked up at the dark sky, the stars hidden behind the clouds. Have you ever discovered betrayal hiding in someone you trusted? What would you have done if you were me? Share in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. I climbed into the front seat, the engine rumbling to life. Because if Travis was telling the truth, this wasn't over, not even close.